Sorry, Mary Claire.
Well, I guess that's the only thing we have to do these days, because I too took Tito out at lunchtime for a nice walk around the hood. Sorry didn't run into you, Theo, but he's a little bit easier to please, and 45 minutes was fine. And now he's snoozing on the couch. But yeah, beautiful day. Oh, sorry, Barb.
Thanks, Mary Claire. Hi, Sideways. I'm Barb Rainish, and the best thing that I did today was have a medical procedure done that's going to help my back for the next several months. Yay! Who's left? Claudia?
Claudia.
Last but not least.
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute, but let me start my video. Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia, the project assistant for PCCEP. And I think the highlight of my day today was, might sound weird, but like saging my house. I haven't did that in a while because I didn't have sage. So I had to go pick some up, and then I cleaned my house, and now so the energy's reset. So that was nice to do this today. That was my highlight.
That's cool.
That is cool. I need to look that up and sage my house. It's been stuffy this winter, so I think some sage would help. Okay, so we have a pretty packed agenda with all the directives up there. So Anne, would you like to take the stage?
Yes, and thank you. I know that we've tried to talk about these a couple of times. So today we were definitely talking about them. We're going to continue. We started out when use of force, deadly force in custody, death reporting and investigation procedures, and weapons administration was under review, but we'll just continue reviewing them because they'll come back around. We are adding, there's 2 that are currently up. However, they are not covered under the DOJ as far as I know. The foot pursuits and the property and evidence procedures, but we can look at those as well. Also, I have we're calling it, or I called it, it's just mine. It's not PCCEP's directives analysis, it's mine. And I want to remind people that are here our process for directives that we agreed upon at PCCEP, that we would review them here, that we would forward our additions or changes or comments to the full board and have a meeting at the next full board meeting, which is later this month. And then we would put the comments on the form, on the directives form, the PPB directives form. So that's our process, and we want to kind of get started on that and review directives as they come up and get as much comment as we can on them. And it's my understanding, and Mary Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, that directives are what guides the PPB officers in their work. Is that right, Mary Claire?
Yes, absolutely.
And I noticed that the foot pursuits, and I'm really glad Laurel is here because you can go over, it's in red, and I'm not really clear what that means. Is that if that's new, or it's just letting us know that we're reviewing them?
What do you mean it's in red?
Well, on the top of the directive, it has red writing saying that it's, if I'm not, I thought it said this was a new directive, but I think I could be wrong. Not that one, the foot pursuits.
So
Okay.
foot pursuits is under review right now. Or it was recently.
I think the red is what I,
So foot pursuits is currently in its second public review, and so I'm gonna click on it and see what I think you're referring to.
I think I'm referring to at the bottom of it, there's a bunch of, it looks like things that you've already changed. Is that correct?
Okay, here, so the red line is just the edits. So if it is red, yes, that's a change from what the current policy is.
And how did you get those changes? Were they submitted online or?
It completely depends. They could have come from, yes, public comments that we received online. And a change from training division or another internal source that looked at the policy and made a recommendation. Any number of, we receive a lot of comments from a lot of different sources, so.
Okay. Since this one is up, we can look at this. I didn't have any feedback on this one. It's not on the piece that we will look at. Does anyone have any feedback they'd like to share on this? Okay. I'm sorry, I can't see the people, sorry. Okay,
I was just, and I was just going to let you know that I do think we received comments from, I'm trying to think of which subcommittee. Do you remember, Laurel? But some folks from PCCEP did send some in, and those were, considered as, part of the foot pursuit revisions as well. So.
Yes, we did. I also don't remember which subcommittee, but I know we received some written feedback.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember whether it was the youth. Yeah. Might have been the youth one, to be honest with you, because I can't think it would have been the behavioral health one, so.
okay. Okay, so let's move on to the use of force. Can you put that one up, please, Claudia? Does anyone have any comments on this directive? Not, let's pull up my analysis piece. And we could just go through that. When I was looking over these directives and making these comments, as you can see, I crossed out the words and put what I think should be there instead. I can't read it. I'll pull out my copy. I know that in PCCEP, we've heard from many people and in our listening sessions, the need for de-escalation techniques. And so I'm asking that is a first step in all instances. And I know when we briefly talked about this earlier, Mary Claire, you said something about, or was it, maybe it was Ashley that said that the wording was crafted in a way that was really took a lot of time, and they would be willing to talk to us about that specifically. Any changes? Do you remember that conversation, Mary Claire?
Yes. I think, Ann, that the issue is when you say as a first step in all instances, we try to stay away from absolutes because there are obviously circumstances where members may not have that ability, if, you know, and so, and we have to hold people accountable to policies. And so if they didn't have the time and they didn't do it, it would, you know, under this version would be, you know, a violation of policy, which, you know, could subject the member to at least some review and discipline. So that's the issue with it is, you know, we try and consider all the possible scenarios that an officer may encounter. And there are times when, you know, a member is just not gonna, if somebody pulls a gun on an officer, they're not gonna stop to, you know, say, you know, whatever. I mean, it just, you know, it may not allow for the time to try to de-escalate or something. So that's sort of an example of why, you know, it's hard to always use absolute terms like all and never and stuff like that. Laurel, did you want to add to that at all?
Not too much, Mary Claire. I think that was pretty well said. We do avoid absolutes because, again, we want to hold people to policy and we want to make it so that the rule can fit multiple situations. But what I hear you saying with that recommendation is that you want de-escalation to be a priority and that maybe there's something that we can evaluate the language to see if there's a way we can strengthen, if there's room for strengthening or emphasizing it more, you know, more than the existing language.
I think that would be great. I think that holding people, officers accountable would be, you know, would be easier if there was a stronger language in that. So I'm hoping, so how would that work? Would you then, how would that work? Would we put, say for instance, if the whole PCCEP board agrees with that, then you would review that and come back with some different language, or what would that look like?
Well, we can, it kind of depends on what the recommendation is and how specific it is. I would submit that the current language is pretty strong. We have de-escalation is really emphasized throughout many of our policies, and in addition to our policies, our training, it's in practice always the preferred method. So I would have to get back to you on that one and think creatively about coming up with language that satisfies the DOJ, that is useful and clear for members, and that reflects reflects what you're suggesting. Because like I think a few people have said, the language is pretty painstakingly crafted to make a lot of different entities satisfied. And
Well, yeah, and I thank you for that. I do know that, you know, we have seen over the summer that de-escalation wasn't always used as a first response. So I just think tightening that up would be good. Moving on to members shall consider a disengagement plan when the benefits outweigh the risks associated with the call. I think that
Can we put that back up?
1.3.
Claudia, can you put the sheet back up? Would you mind? Thanks. And roll it down a
Yeah.
spec. There
Up
you go.
1.3. Could you go
Other
up?
way.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Clyde, right there. So on that one, I took out to be gained, you know, you could see what I took out. It seems to me to be very clear. So that leaves for officers to determine, you know, have some determination in that. What is your thought on that? Laurel?
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to unmute. And I can't tell that this, let me just pull up.
Yeah, and you crossed off that, but where's your stop? When the
It's
benefits?
missing some language, yeah.
I can't tell where ours
Oh,
stopped
the
and yours
first
started.
part, sorry. Yes, the first part is not on there.
So the language, it currently is, members shall consider a disengagement plan when the benefits to be gained by police intervention are clearly outweighed by the risks associated with the call.
Mhm.
So it changes at benefits.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
So outweigh, essentially where you see the outweigh is replaced with, the striked section is struck and then the new outweighs. I guess, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what your,
Thought process was.
what your thought process is here and what you're hoping to accomplish with that change.
Well, once again, my thought is to kind of hopefully push the officers to go to disengagement first, to kind of get in the routine of going there first and not, taking, outweighing, because that's really subjective. That feels very subjective to me. So
I guess what part of it feels subjective to you? The gained by police intervention part?
are clearly outweighed by the I guess when I was reading through this, I just wanted it to be more succinct.
We love looking at language to cut words and make it more clear. So it's something that we can strive for and try. But I just wonder what this edit does somewhat change the meaning, and that would be something that needs to be discussed and thought about
Yeah, Anne, can you tell me, when you say, is there an issue with to be gained by police intervention? Because that really is only, describing what benefits it means, rather than just when the benefits, what benefits. It's just sort of, the benefits by intervention. It's just, so that's a descriptive of benefits. Is there a particular problem with that phrase that you have?
What I'm thinking on that one, I'm going to read the members shall consider a disengagement plan when the benefits, this is how it reads currently, to be gained by police intervention are clearly outweighed by the risks associated with the call. So my rewrite would be members shall consider a disengagement plan when the benefits outweigh the risks associated with the call. So it kind of is once again pushing towards disengagement or maybe de-escalation, but we can move on from that.
Well, I have a question. So what it seems like you're saying is you're asking to kind of shift the default to disengagement.
Yes.
You're asking that what you're proposing is to start assuming disengagement is better than not.
Right.
And that you're weighing. I see what you're saying, and that's a bold and big suggestion, and I think I understand the intent. So
I didn't quite see it that way. I mean, if it were to start with a presumption of disengagement, it would be written inversely. I think it's just ratcheting down the standard for considering that plan from clear outweighing to just outweighing. It's like a standard of review issue. It doesn't say shall engage only when the benefits outweigh the risk. That would be the,
No,
flipping the
right.
presumption, which would be a little bit, I mean, that would be beyond.
That's,
I
Right,
think.
mean,
but
that's-
Jared, but that's what Anne said. She said she would like I understand that the language doesn't reflect that, but what Anne's asking the language to reflect is that a change in the presumption.
And if that's the case, I mean,
To
that's
start with disengagement.
quite radical.
That's why my word was bold, but yes.
yeah, and to Jared's point, that's why I was asking you, and what the problem was with the words of to be gained by police intervention, just so that that's clear to the members, the benefits of the intervention. That's what that's just a descriptive of the benefits. I didn't know if you had a problem with that or didn't have a problem with that, and we're just clearly trying to get to outweigh versus clearly outweigh.
Well, I'm looking for less police intervention. That is kind of part of my thinking in that. Is there anybody else that has any other thoughts?
Geez, I have a ton of them.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, first of all, as much as my goal would be succinctly to say to add more trauma in.
I can't hear you.
Lost you.
Yeah, we lost you, Barb. We can't hear you. Oh,
And is what's the point of them showing up to disengage? That
Barb,
makes,
we lost you for a while there. Could you repeat that, that whole thing?
okay. First of all, if I had my way, it would be a trauma-informed approach possible rather than just purely militaristic. But saying that, if the idea is to disengage first, then why show up at all? That's all.
Well, I don't think they know what the situation is, Barb, until they actually appear. And sometimes it looks to officers that it's better to walk away once they've seen or have the information than to get into something that may, escalate. But you don't know that before you get to a call necessarily.
Okay, Mary Claire, I
Uh-huh.
totally get that situation and I've heard it happen, so I get that part of it. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'd just like to add, there was a pretty high profile case of disengagement with the John Elifritz situation, the gentleman who was shot and killed in at an AA meeting at a homeless shelter. He had been encountered hours earlier in the day and had a knife and was threatening suicide, and officers disengaged at that time. But what happened was a crime spree that ultimately ended in several injuries and that gentleman's death. So disengagement certainly comes with some risks, and I hope the committee considers that when making a recommendation about this important aspect. Disengagement is more than de-escalation. It is leaving the call even though someone called for a particular reason because there was potentially a threat of serious harm, and so that's just something to consider.
thank you for that.
Yeah, Jared, thank you so much. That was really well said and explains an important distinction between disengagement and de-escalation.
Thank you. Let's go down to the next one, 64121. Under restricted uses. Oh, can you go up?
Up a little.
Right there. Or yes, right there. Now, in that one, I'm just removing deliberately. And can you tell me more about why deliberately is in there?
Laura, do you want to go first? Or, I mean, I think,
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Mary
would-
Claire.
I would just offer that that indicates a deliberate, I mean, an intentionality, because at times somebody's head, neck, or throat or groin could be, hit accidentally or in the rough and tumble of whatever, in the interaction, or somebody moves, when they were in the course of it, and it wasn't aimed at that, but it ended up hitting them. So it's, you can't, once again, it's that whole absolute that if you say that, I mean, in order that we're trying to tell them that they can't deliberately do that stuff, but if somebody were accidentally to hit somebody, because of the circumstances of the interaction, then they wouldn't necessarily be in violation of the policy.
Well, my thought there is to take out deliberately, so that it won't be something. I mean, I guess I'm hearing what you're saying. You're giving benefit of the doubt to officers. But when you say don't target their head, neck, and others, I mean, isn't, yeah, as I see Barbara put, it's implying aiming. So I don't know, I'm just wondering about that word. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that?
Just in the chat, Barb wrote, doesn't target imply aiming? To which, yes, I do think I understand that, and that I think that what we want the policy to be is clear, that what we mean is something different than inadvertent or accidental contact with somebody's head, neck, or the other areas listed. And so that's why deliberately target. I don't know, I wasn't there when we drafted this language, but I believe it's designed to be that it's intentional, and that was the level of force that we were trying to identify as deadly force.
Okay.
I have a hard time understanding what could be an accidental target. I mean, if it's targeting, it doesn't seem to be accidental.
I agree.
Yeah, and you have to understand that some of these, in the policy writing for the members of the committee, this is a joint venture with a number of parties, and it could be that somebody wanted a little bit more stress on it. You're right, it may be tautological or what have you,
Yeah,
but
it seems a little redundant, but
yes, exactly.
Language, it doesn't change the meaning at all. So what we want is what this language is designed to reflect is a meaning of deadly force when it's intentional strikes to these areas, or not intentional strikes, but I should say intentional. I'm somewhat referencing a different related policy right now, but I think you get the point that this part of it is there for a reason.
Okay, does anyone else have anything to say about that?
Well, I guess, my concern would be, what if someone recklessly targeted, they were just flailing about, they weren't deliberately going for the head, but they were ignorant or willfully blind to whether they were potentially targeting. I think from, my understanding, that would be could be a deadly force situation when someone's just flailing about wildly, or, I think it's easier to imagine this deadly force case in the instance of discharging the firearm. If someone's just shooting about in a crowd, they may not be targeting someone with that shot, but they're recklessly engaging in it to the point where, to me, that's considered deadly force. But yeah, I suppose reasonable minds might disagree about that.
And that could be something that is addressed in a different way, just because the, it's kind of hard, well, I don't know about hard, but how something is treated or whether something is treated as deadly force is a different question than how you're prescribing members to act in this section. And not to prescribe, recklessness, people typically aren't thinking in the time I'm being reckless. So, but your point is well taken.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I also think that officers are availed to deadly force at any time, right? So I don't know. Okay, let's move on. If Barb, did you have anything that you wanted to say, or Barbara?
I'm good.
Barb, did you have any?
I'm more or less fine.
Okay. Down to the next section, riot control agents, 646. And let's see, let me pull that one up.
Yeah, if you could pull out the whole thing, would you mind reading the?
Okay, it's under authorized uses in crowd control.
Right.
When a person engages in physical resistance or indicates the intent to engage in physical resistance, it authorizes officers to use riot control agents or area impact munitions. Is that correct?
Laurel, you have the policy in front of you? I'm sorry.
Yes, this is under
can't double
646. It's riot control agents or area impact munitions. Then it goes to 6461, authorized uses in crowd control. And then yes, 64613 is when a person engages in physical resistance or indicates the intent to engage in physical resistance.
So I'm suggesting eliminating that based on our experience this summer. And I know that's probably bold, but I think that we saw this summer a video of people that were resisting being impact munitions and other riot control agents were used against them. And that was not popular in our community. I see Barb.
Did you say, I'm sorry, Ann, did you say when they were using physical resistance or weren't?
When they were, like, for instance, what I'm thinking of is the protests this summer.
Yeah.
And people were in physical, they were resisting, they were standing somewhere, and then as we all know what happened after that. So I would like to take that option away. If they're not doing any harm to others, I don't understand why we'd want to use.
Well, I think what you're describing is passive resistance. This says physical resistance. So this, to us means that the person is actually acting out, not being passively resistant. When they engage in physical resistance, like if they push or attack or whatever, it indicates some, not a passive act of or passivity of the individual, but that the individual is actually engaged in some physical behavior.
Well, I guess I would need the definition of physical resistance because that could just be standing somewhere. That's what I'm imagining.
But that would, if you're just standing, that is passive. That's what I'm saying, is there is a definition. Laurel, there, does the definition section have the, what passive resistance is?
So what is physical resistance to you?
I'm trying to unmute myself.
Stay unmuted. Okay.
Physical resistance and passive resistance, yes, are both defined in our use of force policy. Would you like to read the definitions? or-
Yeah, just so she understands. why we-
Passive resistance is a person's non-cooperation with a member that does not involve violence or other active conduct by the individual. Physical resistance is a person's physical attempt to evade a member's control that does not rise to the level of active aggression.
Well, it seems like we need to have it defined clearer in that, because that, when I hear what you're saying, but when I think of physical resistance, physically I'm standing there.
No, it's the behavior you're engaging in, not, if you're just standing there, that's passive. You're not acting. If you start struggling with an officer or get into a, tussle, doing, as she said from that definition, it requires some, behavior of the, other than just standing.
Barb, in the chat says, can you say active aggression? What do you mean? Do you mean insert that?
Well, it just seems more specific than physical resistance or, yeah, physical resistance to me is kind of vague. Now, I'm not in law enforcement, but I thought if you say aggression, then that is more clear. Although I'm not even clear what the area impact munitions are, or like riot control agents. Some of that stuff I don't think should be used at all, but just makes people madder and confuses people. But that's my opinion.
Theo says active aggression, a threat of overt action of assault through physical or verbal means, coupled with the present ability to carry out the threat or assault, which reasonably indicates that an assault or injury to any person is about to happen unless intervention occurs.
Yeah, I just pasted that for context for what Barbara was saying.
Yeah, it seems.
So if it might be simpler to think of it as active is the highest level, then physical is in the middle, and then passive would be the lowest level of resistance.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have anything to say? Let's move down the page then. 7.1. And that one right now. Oh, my pages are off. Oh, here. My pages are off, but I'm asking to add after de-escalating techniques have failed.
Can you explain that a little bit more, Anne? Because I think this is just talking about,
Well,
the contact between a cop car and another occupied vehicle, we're saying is a use of force.
right. But I don't think, I guess what I'm asking again is to if you can't de-escalate it, then you can, you know, you would ram their car. That's what it is, right? Ramming a car of someone?
No,
No.
the police vehicle intervention strategies are referring to several different techniques. Ramming is one of them. It could be the technique where you make another car spin out. Boxing in, which is where two cars, there's a car at each end of the car and you just block them in, or ram.
Mhm.
And again, that section that you're referring to is, like Mary Claire said, this is just a not even a definition, but it's just kind of is a definition or a list. It's not there's nothing in that prescribing what should or should not be done before or after considering that kind of strategy.
Okay. Okay, moving on to 8, deadly force. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Thanks for the definitions, Theo. Okay, down to 8, the deadly force. 8.2. I'm suggesting taking out the last part of that sentence. And help me understand how that would be a negative.
So if I may, I mean, this is similar to what Mary Claire brought up at the beginning of the conversation about absolute types of requirements.
Mhm.
Almost everything we do is going to be pretty fact specific, right? And you don't want to write a rule that then is impossible to follow reasonably in certain circumstances. And so by taking it out, making it just be an absolute, hey, you always have to give a verbal warning to the subject,
Mhm.
will invite situations where somebody will automatically be out of policy, even if it was impossible or unreasonable to expect them to give a verbal warning.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So once again, you're giving options to the officers so that they won't be out of compliance. Is that correct?
No, you're taking into account that there are circumstances in which you can't, expect that of them. So for example, we've had situations, hostage situations. That's the use of deadly force when somebody, shoots at a hostage. If they're inside a building, it's sort of hard to give them a verbal warning. But, they're holding, we've had situations where they're holding a knife to, a person's neck. And, we're not going to, not use the deadly force because, you can't, because you're outside and he's inside and you can't give the person a verbal warning, for example. You want to take whatever action is to save the victim's life. Or if you come upon, somebody starts shooting at you, I think it's probably not reasonable to expect that an officer is going to say, please stop, shooting at me before I shoot at you back. I mean, it's just trying to understand that there is such a wide variety of circumstances. And that's why it says you shall, unless, if the time, safety, or circumstances, then those are, reviewed to make sure that, if somebody, it says shall, unless if time, safety, or circumstances permit. If it's found that, they could have, then they could be found out of policy. But if they could not have because of time, safety, or circumstances, that means that they would not be held to have violated a policy when using deadly force. So,
Well, thank you. I'm learning a lot this evening. But this also, in my mind, gives the officers, well, they determined that circumstances didn't permit, even though maybe they did. I guess my goal is to try to kind of save the victim and the perpetrator, to use deadly force only as a very last resort, but I hear what you're saying.
Well, I think that's clearly what, the Bureau would like as well. Nobody likes in any circumstances to use deadly force. But I think there are times when people, can understand when it's, unavoidable. And as tragic and unfortunate as that is.
Okay.
I'd
Yeah,
like
I just want to add that I think that type of phrasing, I'm confident that type of phrasing, if time, safety, and circumstances permit, is consistent with a national best practice. And so, Ann, if you're aware of a police department in some, major or middle-sized city that does it differently, I think that would help me understand, the reasonableness of doing an all-out shall. But from my perspective, I don't believe any police department has a mandatory shall give the warning without any exception for an exigency where the circumstances are so fraught with safety concerns that there is no reasonable time or circumstance to give that type of warning. So this is language the Department of Justice has been comfortable with, having that exception, just to give you some context from our perspective nationally.
Okay. Thank you.
And to Jared's point as well, I will tell you that both, DOJ and the COCL have approved all of this language. These are, this has been, it's been through reviews, multiple times. And a determination has been made that these, qualifications that I understand you have, concerns about have been approved for that very reason, because I don't think any place in this country would find, have an absolute rule, such that an officer would be held or be disciplined for not giving a warning in certain circumstances. And I will tell you that, that issue of time, safety, and circumstances is going to be looked at. I mean, officer-involved shootings or the use of deadly force go through a very comprehensive and, fulsome review within the Bureau, so that, all those aspects are looked at.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. And then I think the last one on that one is categories of review. I know that there is a movement across the country to eliminate the neck holds. I see it's still listed here. What is the background on that?
Where do you want to go? The movement is to get rid of chokeholds. Carotid neck things are a broader thing, but Laurel, do you want to? We've been going through this one.
Yes,
and
yeah, what
to be
is the-
honest with you,
Yeah, what's the specific question? Are
the
we,
carotid,
we
yeah.
wouldn't be considering changing our review. Our policy already reflects that carotid neck holds are considered, they're investigated at a deadly force level.
And it's different than
There's nowhere to go from here.
No, but she thought that carotid neck holds were banned, and I was saying, no, it's the chokehold, and that carotid is actually a pressure on, this, it's a little bit more than a choke. Carotid neck hold, my understanding, is different than a chokehold.
Can you kill someone by the carotid neck hold?
Sure, you can.
Yes,
Yes.
So PPV does not do chokeholds, but they do carotid neck holds. Is that correct?
What I would say, This is a very complicated question, but what I would say is there isn't, in both cases, these are two types of force that are considered deadly force.
Mhm.
They are they're not they're not banned in the traditional sense. If deadly force is authorized, it's an option that can be used.
Mhm.
There is not active training on chokeholds. That's not a technique that we are, to my knowledge, instructing in. Carotid neck holds is more specific. There might be, I don't want to speak to that. I'm not in training or, but the important takeaway points are both of these are types of force that are treated as deadly force and are only authorized if deadly force is justified.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I understood what was going on, and maybe I missed it. And before I say that, I want to know what 9 was and what 11 was, and if they're really gone. So that's one question. And then,
Hold on, tease.
What we're looking at, Barb, thank you for that question, is just my
that
notes.
was done.
So no, they're still there. It was just,
Just how you edited the page to show that. Okay, so
they're just my notes. We can talk about anything about any of these. These were just my notes.
no, that's completely irrelevant. But if you keep moving what's on the screen, we're going to really have a big problem here. Okay, you guys? That's just not cool, or okay, actually, as far as I'm concerned. And if I have to write up a reasonable accommodation, I will. So 9 and 11 exist. 10, when it says categories of review, doesn't that mean if an officer does do a carotid neck hold, he will be reviewed by his supervisor to determine whether that was a proper use or not? Anyone?
So categories of review, all force is reviewed by a supervisor. Categories of review refers to the level of review required. And deadly force is the highest level, and it requires a very extensive investigation. And carotid neck holds are investigated at that very highest level. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And sorry,
And
Barb,
Barb-
I think it's just a little harder because she only, selected the pieces that she wanted changed. And so you can't see the context of what is above and, below and stuff. And so it makes it a little more difficult for you. But this is literally just, section 10 is about, as
Got it.
Laurel said, what level of review these certain, actions get. So every use of force by a bureau, whether it's resisted handcuffing or deadly force, are investigated. It's the level, obviously deadly force gets the highest level of review by the bureau. And the other ones have just go up a chain of command or whatever. So.
And Barb, thank you for that feedback. This is the first time that I am facilitating this review. And I think next time what we should do is just have on the screen the directives and go down them, and then I could say my comments on them. So I'm sorry for that. Would that be more helpful? Barb, did you hear that piece?
I heard nothing of it. Sorry, Anne. That's why I turned my video off and I turned the mic off, but it didn't. I mean, it's my problem probably with bandwidth.
Oh, what I was saying was that moving forward, this is my first time reviewing these, but I think next time just having the directives themselves the entire directive on the screen, and we can go through them. I just had my comments or my thoughts on the screen. So would that be more helpful if we had the full directive rather than my comments, and then I just talk about my comments?
It will always be better when someone is editing a document or showing edits on a document, that they show the context so they don't get rid of 9 and 11 unless 9 and 11 are really gone. And then also showing, like you do, whether it's a strikeout or you're adding information. And I'm sorry I'm bitchy about the thing moving around on the screen, but I've been fighting migraines for the last 2 or 3 days.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay, but you know, that's a really good way to get one. So.
Well, thank you. I think next time when we do this, definitely we'll do it differently, and I apologize for that. In the efforts of time, and let's just finish this last one. Supervisor reporting and investigation. The addition there was, and also refer to our civilian oversight agency. That's, in my mind, speaks to the new civilian oversight agency that the voters voted on this last fall. And I know it's not operational yet. And so I didn't know if you thought about that and adding that to directives, but that was just where that was coming from. Mary Claire, have you?
And our current policies, you know, we do have our current policies have guidance for when use of force or any type of many different types of conduct get referred to the police review board. I understand that you're referring to a new agency and a new system. Is what your recommendation is, that all force, or is it when a supervisor is involved in use of force, that's an automatic referral to the civilian oversight agency?
That's a good point. I'm wondering, and I don't know how it's going to play out with the new oversight, if they're going to review all. So we'll just take that one off. I think, Claudia, you can quit sharing the screen now. Thank you. I think in looking at the other ones, deadly use of force in custody, death reporting, and investigation procedures 1010.10. I'm wondering if anyone has any feedback on that or any comments on that one. I want to just move on through that. I only had one comment, and now going through this, I'm understanding the process a little more.
So you can just walk through, work through. Are you comfortable walking through that?
Okay.
Exactly.
So I think.
Hey, Mary Claire, you're not muted. I mean, we can't hear what you're saying. I just wanted to let you know.
I think it was muted on accident, or unmuted on accident, so I muted it.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
So on the other directives that we were looking at, I don't have any other comments on them. So I don't know if anyone here tonight has anything that they want to bring up on them. And thank you I'm still kind of working through this process, but I know that we would like to get in the routine of allowing public comments. So if we don't have anything else,
It does look like there's some public comments, Diane. Barbara can
I
probably.
have my hand up, sorry.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I see there's something about property and evidence procedures, and I'm sorry, I didn't read that. I just want to sort of express a concern. I know that like once that there's a pretty strict, at least I've seen there's pretty strict, like once something gets in the chain of what they call chain of evidence or something, that it's a pretty strict procedure. But how do you make sure that if something is taken away from a driver of a car or a pedestrian, that it actually enters that chain of evidence? I've just heard things years ago, and I'm wondering what
Mary
would,
Claire, do you have anything?
thank you.
I'm sorry. Laurel,
Barb, could you just tell the story that you're referring to? Because that context might be helpful in trying to.
Okay, I've heard back in the day, and not in Oregon, so I've just heard sometimes.
oh, then we didn't do it, Barb.
I know you didn't do it, Mary Claire. I know you didn't do it. But no, but this is a concern I have, just because I've heard of people claiming they had things planted on them. And I had heard from people who said that, okay, so like you get pulled over for marijuana, you have 6 pounds, you show up in court, you're accused of 2. Nobody's going to say, hey, where's my other 4 pounds in court, right? And then the other thing is that I heard 2 white men who were not related to each other and had just been introduced, talking about what they call a drop gun. And the way they got the drop gun was if you pull somebody over and they have an unregistered weapon and you take it away from them, they can't complain about that and they drive off very relieved. But then you have something that in case of a bad situation, you can drop next to a victim of somebody that's dead. And I know that's a pretty heavy like accusation thing, but I have heard these things from people, and not even from the same people, or the same group of people. So it's kind of like, I'm just wondering how you can make sure that that happens. You know what I mean? I know it's complicated.
No, it sounds like what you're saying is how do our policies, or is it possible for policy to reflect or prevent officers from stealing or planting contraband on people?
Right.
Okay, so the answer is there are a lot of areas of our policy that prohibit that type of conduct. It's definitely both against the law and it would be in violation of a lot of different evidence procedures and things. But I guess I don't have a policy solution to that. I think that our rules are clear that that's something that's prohibited. But again, that I don't know how to address the.
Yeah, I don't either. If I had something I could suggest, I would, but I just have to say, I've seen officers, I mean, not here, a long time ago, back in the 70s, even when like they were arresting marijuana was like a serious drug charge, right? I personally saw an officer walking with some other officers out of a police station. It was at night. I was there as a sort of victim witness. And one of them was smoking a joint. And the other officer said, some other officer said something to him and he kind of laughed it off. They said, oh, just because you're so-and-so's son or something. But I saw that. I also saw them treat a suspect in a very suspicious way and them saying they were going to take a stick to him. And that's all illegal and against policy, but it happened anyway. You know what I'm saying?
I understand that. Well, I'll tell you, in Oregon, that would be pretty unuseful evidence to plant on anyone, given the state of our laws. So,
well, yeah, okay, but a gun would be, right?
But Barb, I guess in those cases, we have policies and we have laws, and we would be dependent in those kind of situations and I understand you mentioned that it's hard to make a complaint, But the only way we would be able to know about it or investigate it, and we certainly would investigate it if anybody made a complaint. And I would remind people that complaints can be anonymous to the IPR. And so if somebody says, officer planted or whatever, they will investigate that. So that's the only system we have in order to make sure that, that those kind of actions don't take place. But I will tell you that there, I don't know when the last complaint like that,
Okay.
has been made with IPR or the Bureau. So, that's the check and balance, is that, if we get a complaint, then there's, accountability in terms of doing, full investigations on that under internal affairs.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, Barb?
Thanks, Ann. So I'm just wondering, and I don't even know where the legislation is, but there was talk about the state legislature having the law in the books where officers were like required to report their peers if they were doing anything wrong. And I don't know where that law is right now, but I would think that would or wouldn't it cover something like this?
Sure. If somebody witnessed it, they would have an obligation, and we do have that in our policy. If an officer, observes, criminal conduct, it is incumbent upon them to report it. In terms of other, non-criminal, but, policy violations, is, I think we've talked about before. I think that's called the duty to intervene. And I do, you're right, the legislature is looking at some bills, I believe, this session. They've come up before. But, for the Bureau itself, we're not waiting for the Oregon legislature. We, after the, George Floyd situation, made a decision ourselves to pursue the ABLE training, which is the active bystander for law enforcement. And I think, we've told you a little bit about it. We've had 4 of our members go through the train the trainer, and we will be, that will be a required course for all members during the course of this year. Hoping to have it start in the summer, but it might not be till fall, depending upon, the scheduling, the training. But they, everybody will be required to do I think it's 10-hour class, and then we are committed, when you sign up for that program, you have to do a 2-hour for the next 3 years to follow up on this. So it's not just a one and done kind of situation. So I think that, indicates the Bureau's commitment to, pursuing this and strengthening even the, policies we have in effect now. So, and we will keep you posted on that because that will, we're actually going to be developing a policy. And so that would come to you guys as well. So you'll get to see that when it's posted. That's in the stage. Laurel can talk a little bit about where the, but they're working on that policy as we speak. So. Laurel, you got anything else to add on that?
No, just that we're excited about the program and the training, and having a policy that neatly reflects it and lists all of the duties in that regard in one place.
And Barbara, you brought to mind a case I worked on as a first-year lawyer, and a police officer who was actually off duty at home shot his neighbor, which for reasons I won't get into, and then yelled for a drop down to make it look like self-defense. And that person obviously was investigated and put behind bars for that. I worked on that as an appeal, where he was trying to suppress the evidence. But yeah, it does happen. All you can hope for is that it gets investigated fully and prosecuted fully.
Okay, I don't have anything else. Vadim, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't. Just a quick question. What's the next step based on the process today?
Well, since this is our first time kind of doing the process, I've learned a lot about directives, and after the discussion, I think that I don't have any, the process would be that we'd talk about them, flesh them out, and then bring them to the full board meeting. I don't know if there was any real desire to bring forward my ideas. So, and I heard enough feedback, so I'm satisfied with the status. So I think in the future, when we do this, if there's feedback, and help me with this, I mean, we were both together in deciding this process, but that we would, ask for changes to directives, and then we would take them to the full board and vote on them, and then have them put on the system. Is that correct? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's what I thought would happen. I just wasn't sure based on discussion today with respect to these, whether there were things that you were pursuing before the full board or full committee, that is, or what the next steps would be. So just wanted to kind of understand that piece. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I would remind you that even if you don't want to, sorry, that's Tito. Even if you don't want to, bring them to the committee at, to the full committee to ask for them, anybody, can submit as an individual. And so if you still had a few of those that you weren't clear of, just because we've explained them, I don't want you to think that, the conversation wasn't valuable to us, or if there are still areas that you want us to look, because you mentioned a couple of times, could we look at it? We'd be happy to do that. So, people, like I said, we're not bound by just having the full committee do it. If individuals, just like anybody in Portland, can send in comments, and they will be considered by the policy team.
Well, thank you for that. I don't know, I can review my notes. Nothing really, came to light. Is there anything anyone would like us to bring to the full board to discuss further or to add? I'm not seeing anyone. Vadim, did you have anything?
I don't have anything, thanks.
Okay, well, I appreciate everyone's time tonight. It was very interesting. I learned a lot, and we will make this a part of our monthly meetings. We're going to focus on DOJ directives, unless other members want to bring something else up. So we will see many of you at our next meeting, and thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to say, Vadim?
No, thank you, everybody. Good seeing y'all. And as Ann said, see you next time. Looking forward to it. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this, Ann. It's good.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Laurel and Mary Claire, for the explanations, and for leading it.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you all.
I'll now go feed Tito, who continues to whine while you listen to him.
Really,
Sorry.
it sounded like
Sorry.
a human, Mary Claire. I think you have a human locked up there.
No, it's Tito. Goodbye.
Bye.